Persistent Poverty, The Chronic Lacking of, by Kaden and Gibson Award.
Poverty is the lack of material resources that are necessary to live a decent, dignified life. It should be measured by various thresholds using money and physical resources as measurement tools.
Let's break this down. We define poverty as having a lack of resources to live a decent, dignified life. But what is a decent, dignified life?
Robert Rector, a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, argues that people in modern-day poverty in the United States are far better off than those in poverty seen in other parts of the world. For example, 99.6% of Americans who were deemed to be in poverty in 2005 owned a refrigerator. Along with the statistic, Rector brings forth several other amenities that many Americans who are considered to be in poverty have. Essentially, Rector would argue that people in America, even those considered in poverty, are living decent, dignified lives. For America, although this is not unique to America, there are many unique advantages to more affluent people that do not include tangible characteristics. For example, in the college application process, people have access to private SAT tutors, and even looking at preschool, more affluent people can afford it while others do not.
Rector's argument leaves out those who still may struggle, even if they have a refrigerator, TV, microwave, stove or oven, air conditioning, etc. His argument also leaves out people who may have purchased an amenity when they were not in poverty, but now are. A decent, dignified life does not simply mean that one has amenities. It means that they can operate in society without being seen or feeling less than those around them. For example, by lacking nicer clothes, a person may be embarrassed to go out in public or go to church fearing social consequences. It is important to address these social issues as they impact the capabilities, an idea we will dive into deeper later on, of every person.
Now that we have defined what a decent, dignified life is, let's look at how we would go about measuring whether or not someone is living one. In order to measure poverty, you have to look at two key aspects: how one's income would be measured and how the threshold would be next set.
Starting with income, we propose a way of measuring that is similar to the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM. The SPM is an improvement of another way of measuring official poverty measure, OPM. OPM measures income as a family's income before tax plus government transfers, such as Social Security. OPM leaves out benefits such as SNAP. SPM improved upon this by resources such as Social Security and SNAP. The SPM is an improvement as it provides a broadened definition of income, allowing us to see what resources a family actually has access to. However, these definitions leave out two key factors: charitable donations and unusual out-of-pocket costs.
The definition of income that we propose includes both of these: income after tax, subtracting out-of-pocket unusual expenses and adding non-cash benefits, plus charitable resources. The reason for the addition of charitable donations and unusual out-of-pocket cost is to make our definition of income more relevant to the actual resources a family has access to.
In the case of charitable donations, say, person A obtains resources from a food bank. This would be added to since a family benefits from food banks, it would not have to spend as much on food and could channel monetary resources elsewhere. Say you had two people who are the exact same, but person A has access to a food bank and person B does not. Person A could theoretically use these resources to go take night classes or purchase an amenity to increase their quality of life.
In the case of replacing medical out-of-pocket expenses to unusual out-of-pocket expenses, by changing the language to unusual out-of-pocket expenses, more expenses, which may not be picked up in the thresholds, would then be picked up. Say someone has to pay a speeding ticket. This impacts their income and the resources they have to pay for necessities, but hopefully it's assumed that the cost of a speeding ticket is not monthly, but theoretically a one-time expense.
The major tool used to measure poverty would be money. This is due to the fact that the majority of the world, money is used as a tool for exchanging to get the necessary resources. For example, food, water, electricity, and housing. Poverty is a far-reaching concept that definitely cannot be defined by just money, but for the purposes of measuring, money is the best option as it is the most globalized form of measurement. The goal of our measurement style is for it to be versatile and adaptable for every person in the world. It could be adjustable for every currency and inflation per region and would take into account the cost of goods within the area it's measuring. Anyone whose post-tax income plus cash and charitable benefits minus unusual out-of-pocket expenses falls below the threshold and would be considered impoverished. This approach would fluctuate per person.
Speaking of thresholds, this is where our approach really differentiates from OPM and SPM. OPM measures its thresholds as 3 times the cost of a thrifty food basket. It is calculated this way since in the 1950s, people spent a third of income on food. This measure is now about 15%. SPM measures its threshold by taking a median of all household expenditures. These thresholds leave out many expenses such as funerals, car crashes, weather damages, traffic tickets, and vet bills.
Our approach takes a radically different approach to measuring the threshold. It follows along with a capabilities approach. This approach addresses the idea of capabilities and functions. Capabilities are the ability to do something, while function is actually doing that something. A popular example used is riding a bike. Having the capability to ride a bike would involve whether or not you have access to one. You can physically ride it. It is socially acceptable to ride a bike, and if there are safe roads to ride on. Meanwhile, having the function of riding a bike would be literally riding the bike. Taking into account capabilities is critical to truly assessing the situation people are in.
Our choice of measurement would take into account someone's capabilities. We would provide varying thresholds to account for the different experiences an impoverished group may experience. All of the measures we have talked about adjust for the number of people in the family such living in the home. However, they do not account for other expenses some people may have more of than others. For example, someone who has diabetes needs insulin to survive. This would cause this person's cost of medical care to be higher. The threshold would be raised for this person as they need more money to account for their needs. Or sanitation products for women versus men. Women need sanitation products, but yet this cost is not counted for them. In this case, the threshold will be raised for women rather than men. There is one major counterargument to our approach. Quality of life is different for every region. How will the thresholds be chosen for different regions? For example, the cost of owning a car and buying gas will be counted for someone who needs to commute to work. But for someone who may not need a car to be capable in society, the cost of a car would not be added to the threshold. So, really our approach would be looking at the individual within the context of the region, thereby taking into account the social implications someone lives in.
Now, let's look at how this measurement approach would work with an example. Take person A and person B. Assume everything between them is the same, excluding the factors we will be discussing. Also, assume all factors cost the same. Person A has 2 children they must care for. So, child care would be added to their threshold, increasing their threshold by X amount.
Now, person B is paying for night classes, which would then add to their threshold.
On top of night classes, person B lives in an apartment where they must pay a housing and internet bill. This would be added to their threshold.
Now, person A has diabetes, has to commute to work, and is pregnant and takes prenatal care. All these costs are added and make person A's threshold to be increased to higher than person B. Person A and person B can make the same income, but person A could be considered impoverished and person B not.
As shown, this approach is fairly versatile and can take into account a multitude of factors that could be left out with the other approaches.
To conclude, we propose a very idyllic way of measuring poverty and acknowledge that this approach would be fairly difficult to implement. However, in an ideal world, this approach would give the best measurement of poverty. It shows what people truly have access to live a dignified life.
Thank you.